Good afternoon, dear students. Today we'll cover a new topic in the Arab and European Civilizations and Multiculturalism course. This is lecture 7, and we will cover a topic continuing on the relation between Arab and European civilizations. And this topic is about pandemics and the fate of civilizations. So last time we began mentioning the historical encounter, the last two lectures, on the dialectic or the interaction between Arab and European civilizations and from a historical approach. So today we will focus on a specific topic, which is pandemics, and it is important nowadays, especially from what we're witnessing around the world, from the spread of COVID-19 or the coronavirus, so how it spread all over the world and how it's considered a threat. And we want to understand in this lecture how pandemics affected civilizations through the past centuries in order to understand our future, or how this would affect the future of interaction between civilizations and the relations between European powers, big powers or superpowers like the US. And also pandemics, of course, would have an effect on international system and world order. So try to think about how the interactions between the different countries would be different between the different civilizations, and how this could affect globalizations and neoliberal policies adopted by various nations. How would this pandemic affect the concept of nationalism, because we witnessed the rise of populist trends or the rise of populist movements all over the world, and maybe some populist leaders. So how would this pandemic would have an effect on global politics would be something that you would work on. Topics that would be covered in this lecture will begin with a definition of pandemic, and also we will see historically how pandemics developed, so, and also how the main pandemics across history will see just a timeline of this. And we will focus on Egypt, how it dealt with pandemics in the 19th century. So we'll take an example of Egypt and how it would it could take from the French experience or from the Western experience in dealing with infectious diseases. So how was this present? And we will learn from it a lot about the history of relation between civilizations. So also we'll understand how people dealt with pandemics, and that would help us maybe with trying to deal with something really erupting nowadays, and maybe inshallah it won't have this effect as the big or the great pandemics across history, due to the advancement and scientific cooperation between countries. But we will see just examples as a history. So it's better to know what has happened historically, and hopefully the future will be better. So as for civilizations and pandemics, we have nowadays technological advancement, but we have also a problem in sometimes contestation between countries, like in Germany, like in the US, like in China, like Japanese corporations. So those scientific corporations are working a lot on finding this cure for or vaccine for this disease. So whether it's better nowadays to have cooperation, whether it's how would this affect the future of relations between civilizations is something that you would think of. So pandemics in general usually they spread across civilizations easily, and those pandemics is a disease that spreads in just different regions and territories, and also pandemics had an effect on civilizations, and we can see that for the civilizations there were various reasons for the collapse of civilizations across history, like climate change, like famines, like pandemics, like popular revolts, like social violence. So these are some of the reasons that led to the collapse of civilizations. So an interesting article written a few years ago by Deborah Mackenzie, it's written about how pandemics threaten civilization. So it's a very interesting article, and it said in the article that there were many articles tackling pandemics, and that pandemics are coming and they can be just flu or something else, but that would be possible, and some diseases like plagues or smallpox or those diseases can be threatening to humanity at large. So various studies have predicted plagues and famines and wars, and so that's a photo in the 1918 Spanish flu or the influenza pandemic. So what's the difference between epidemic and pandemic? So an epidemic is a sudden disease outbreak that affects a large number of people, larger than what is normally expected. But that would be in a particular region, community, or population. But pandemic is different, that it's a disease that spreads to a large group of people across the world, across different regions, across different nations and continents. Pandemics are developed across history, and there were many pandemics, very famous ones. One that occurred in 430 BC in Athens during its fight with Sparta during the Peloponnesian War, and also there was the Antonine Plague in 165 AD, and which led to the fall of the emperor, and he was one of its victims. And also in 250 AD there was this Cyprian plague. In 541 the Justinian plague, and there was the cholera. So what's important for us nowadays is the 20th century pandemic, like in 1918 the Spanish flu, in 1957 the Asian flu, in 1981 the HIV, the AIDS, and in 2003 the SARS, and in 2019 the COVID-19. So some of those pandemics were affecting humanity and affecting nations and civilizations more than others. In the early 1800s, the cholera turned into being a pandemic, and it began in India and grew faster and spread all over China and other Asian countries. And also the influenza epidemic, and that would spread a lot during the World War I, and moving troops from one country, from one space or territory to another, helped fuel its expansion. The Justinian epidemic or pandemic was very crucial historically and led to the fall of the Roman Empire. So that spread in the 6th century and killed as many as 50 million people. And there was no vaccination at that time. and it affected his history and affected the Byzantine Empire. So the plague of Justinian arrived in Constantinople, and it was seen as spread from Egypt to all over the Mediterranean Sea. So also some historians say that it originally spread from China to northeast India, and then via land and sea trade it spread to Europe, and then to Europe through Mediterranean ports. The Black Death was also, unfortunately, a pandemic that hit Europe in 1347, and that was recorded as one of the worst pandemics historically in 14th century Europe, and this would lead to millions of deaths. At that time, quarantine was practiced a lot in Europe, so this began during the 14th century, and quarantine comes from the Italian word quaranta giorni, which means 40 days. So that was because port authorities required ships arriving in Venice from infected ports to sit at anchor for 40 days before landing. So nowadays, let us think about the future of the world in light of a growing pandemic, which is probably will be, inshallah, it won't be that harmful to humanity, but it comes in light of tensions between civilizations. If we remember Samuel Huntington's writings of Clash of Civilizations and the great threats in front of Western civilizations, mainly from China and from or Chinese civilization and Islamic civilization. So there are many tensions between China and the United States, and nowadays there is tension. So it comes at a time where every country is trying to restore or preserve its borders, and US President Donald Trump keeps saying that we have to, like the slogan of his campaign, making America great again. So it comes in light of rising populist trends and rising nationalism. So would it work if each nation or each country at this time, when there are closed borders everywhere and globalization is threatened, that there's no free movement of goods and services and people all over the world, so how would different cultures and different peoples interact together? So the United States of America is asking South Korea for some help in terms of new expertise and new knowledge in how to deal with this disease. Also, if you read or heard the news about Donald Trump keeps saying that this virus is called the Chinese virus. He doesn't call it coronavirus. And recently he said, I will stop calling it Chinese virus. So is it a problem with the Chinese culture, or it's just a problem of wars and clashes between civilizations and nations, or we'll have to work together to cooperate? It doesn't mean a lot whether this virus emerged from China or any place in the world, but it makes us think of how to deal with the virus. So Trump actually was replying to some Chinese officials who said that this virus is an American biological weapon. So he said that's why he said that this is the reason why he keeps saying the Chinese virus, because he says, I don't regret it, but they accused us of having done it through our soldiers. Look, everyone knows it came out of China, but I decided we shouldn't make any more of a big deal out of it. I think I made a big deal. I think people understand it, but that all began when they said our soldiers started it. Our soldiers had nothing to do with it. So this means that he says that it's just a response to some Chinese officials who said that this is created in American labs or by some American officials or soldiers. But this makes us question what different cultures, different nations, how they would interact together in light of this pandemic, and how would this affect the future of relations, how would this affect globalization and global citizenship, how would it have an effect on the economy, will it lead to economic recession, will it lead to unemployment? So just think of these questions in the last lecture we will tackle the future of civilizations. So maybe this pandemic would affect somehow our view of what will be, or how would civilizations interact together. Another article spoke about or tackled the idea of scientific cooperation. So scientific cooperation should know no borders or no boundaries. Those are some links for some articles that would be interesting to read as extra readings on the history of pandemics and whether pandemics will bring down civilizations or not necessarily, because sometimes it leads to different power relations between countries, different interactions, but not necessarily that leads to the fall of civilizations, and this is what we can see from history. The second part in this lecture is a focus on Egypt, and the readings in this part is from Dr. Khaled Fahmi's books. He had a very interesting book called The Body and Modernity, Essays in the History of Medicine and Law in Modern Egypt, and that is in Arabic. And I will provide you with a chapter from this book, and that will be available to you by email. And also another book recently published, In Quest of Justice, Islamic Law and Forensic Medicine in Modern Egypt. And the third reading is a history of Qasr al-Aini Palace, so how it became a medical school. And we're taking this part not to just understand a lot about medicine in Egypt, but trying to link between medicine and politics. So it's very important to understand that medicine and politics are related. So nowadays there is a call from the Council of Ministers that we'll have a quarantine or not, or trying to limit people's movement, or trying to, so any decision of imposing a quarantine or imposing restraints on people's movement is related to politics and is related to medicine. So the body of citizens, or the human body is related to politics, and that has been there for ages. So that's the cover of the book. So body, or the human body, has been all the time a subject of state control. So the state controls the human body, usually through the movement, usually through the how people behave, interact, and also that it's this biopower, or the idea of controlling citizens in order to have a good state, a healthy state. So having healthy citizens would lead to having a healthy state. And that was the vision of Muhammad Ali when he became the ruler of Egypt, that he thought that when he appoints Claude Bey, who was a French, very well known, a French doctor, when he appoints him in the army, and that would lead to a healthy army, and that at the very end would lead to a healthy state. So having a healthy population is essential for the health of the body politic or the state, as a metaphor of the states. So the body has been all the time a subject of power, and Michel Foucault mentioned the importance of disciplinary power. So sometimes the state should control the life of the citizens, and he mentioned this as microphysics of power, that power is there everywhere, at schools, at prisons, at hospitals. So how, for example, let us see that doctors and are considered having some power over their patients. So this is a form of political power in Foucault's point of view, that this resembles political power. So control over human body is political. And he mentioned also, Khaled Fahmy in his book mentioned the rise of forensic medicine in Egypt, أو الطب الشرعي. So this is considered the political medicine, and that was essential in modern Egypt to know the reason of why people died, and that would be a mixture between legal aspects and medical aspects. So at that time there was a revolt or a kind of resistance from people to this new forensic medicine and the anatomy of human bodies, as this would be against maybe some Islamic ideas. That was the point of view of certain people at that time. We're speaking about the 20th century, the early 20th century. So that was the point of view, that we shouldn't introduce the French new laws or medical institutions, but Muhammad Ali insisted on introducing this, as that this would be an approach to improve the army, improve the and have a healthy population and a healthy state. So Mohamed Ali Pasha introduced the European military system in Egypt and also provided it with the medical aid, and he assigned Dr. Claude Bade from France to establish a medical school to prepare doctors for the army in the year 1827. And after 10 years, this medical school was transferred to Qasr al-Aini. And Qasr al-Aini, of course, as a school, has witnessed a lot of changes till now, but this was the idea of how to import medical or technological advancements in medicine, how to import them from other countries and try to be more advanced and treat your patients. So forensic medicine was imported at that time to control diseases like cholera and plague, and because it was essential to determine the reason of death. So forensic medicine, as you know, is a branch of medicine dealing with the application of medical knowledge to establish facts in civil and criminal legal cases, such as an investigation into the cause and time of a suspicious death. So it was very important in order to contain those diseases at that time to apply forensic medicine, and that was imported from the West. So here modern scientific knowledge and practices were introduced. Here we will just have a recap of what we mentioned, that those historical incidents were just examples in order to understand how civilizations interacted with each other, how they imported some scientific knowledge, and to have a point of view, or I want each of you to think of how the future of countries and how civilizations and different countries help each other, and sending equipment, sending medical knowledge, and that at the very end will help humanity by and large. Thank you very much, and keep safe and take care, and good luck with your studies. Thank you.